One of the most extraordinary things to witness as a non-Jew, I'm an Irish Catholic looking at all this, but within hours of what happened, there were mass protests all around the world, from New York to Sydney, where there were people chanting "Gas the Jews" in Sydney, one of the great cities of the world. In London, there were protests in my high street up near the Israeli embassy, mass protests with many people celebrating what had happened. And I found that unconscionable, that any human being's first reaction to this appalling terror attack would be one of jubilation. We then saw US professors at American universities, one at Cornell, caught on camera saying how exhilarated he felt by what had happened. We've seen students, again, at American universities beaming pro-Hamas rhetoric onto campus walls. We've seen Jewish students barricading themselves in libraries for fear of their safety from chanting mobs. And in these protests in London and New York and others, many people there, pro-Palestinian protests, chanting jihad and from the river to the sea. When you see all this as a reaction to this appalling attack on Israel, how does that make you feel?
You know, I was talking to my wife the other day. I still remember September 93. In September 93, 13th September, there was a ceremony at the White House lawn where Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the leader of the Palestinian National Movement, Yasser Arafat, shook hands under the auspices of President Clinton and signed the Oslo Accords, or started them, and the entire nation was watching it. And I was telling then my wife, we had a baby, we had 2 babies. This, you know what? Perhaps our children will not have to fight. Well, that reality has been shattered long ago. And we understand that we always will have to fight. And as opposed to previous generations, we have now the State of Israel, and we have the tools to fight, and Jews can fight all over the world. Jews are threatened. I have friends from all corners of the earth, people I grew up with, I studied with. They are extremely frightened. And I had friends, including one of your most distinguished colleagues who was in Israel last week, told me, I feel much safer in Israel. He's Jewish. Now, this is unacceptable, because history teaches us that anti-Semitism is always the beginning, but the tragedies unfold to all other human beings. This is the greatest disease of humanity. Anti-Semitism is the greatest disease of humanity. What these people are chanting is not only immoral and unjust, but it's a reflection of their own knowledge of things or their own moral compass. How could you justify, truly, how could you justify chopping children's heads? How could you justify burning entire families? How could you justify raping women of all ages and taking them hostage? How could you justify tearing off people's, women's and men's scalps? How could you justify these horrific atrocities? Broadcasting live how you carry out these atrocities. Taking a mother's iPhone and broadcasting to the her entire WhatsApp group how you are torturing her husband, killing her daughter and her young children. And this goes on and on and on. This is a test for humanity and a moral call for moral clarity. And human beings and leaders must be outraged and understand that when you give a nation the right for self-defense, it has a right for self-defense.
The American Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, tweeted, "From the river to the sea is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction or hate." What is your response to that?
She simply, above everything else, I mean, all these atrocious comments, all this terrible view of things, she simply doesn't know history. The world recognized the Jewish state's right for independence in November 1947 in the UN General Assembly. The family of nations accepted. Our borders were, of course, agreed. That border was violated by this terror attack. And we have strived for peace all throughout since then. We've extended our hand for peace. We signed peace agreement. We defended ourselves. We fought for peace. We were willing to go for peace. But unfortunately, the entire culture of hate, the culture of jihad, may I remind you about John the jihadist, who simply would show the entire world how he takes a prisoner and cuts his head? That's what jihad is all about.
And when people chant,
that is
Mr.
not
President,
a revolutionary moment.
when people chant from the river to the sea, what does that mean to you?
That means annihilating Israel, because we have the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. This is, of course, a call to annihilate the state of Israel, the only nation state of the Jewish people on earth. The Jewish people have founded this state after returning to their ancient homeland, rebuilding it, and being recognized by the international community, unfortunately, following the worst atrocity of humanity, which is the Holocaust, where 6 million of our people were burned, gassed, killed, and tortured, and killed by all sorts of the most terrible means in the most violent attack humanity has seen, whereby the forces of good, led by the United States of America, by the British, the United Kingdom, of course, by the USSR in those days, they all, and together with all other nations, had to fight the Nazis and their allies and liberate Europe. And that brought the change in the world. That brought the creation of the United Nations. That led to the Human Rights Charter. That brought to the definition of what genocide is all about and crimes against humanity. Well, the New World Order was created. Well, the world order is being challenged, and challenged dramatically. This is the real challenge in facing all leaders of the world, guys. Don't be mistaken. You have to be tough and strong to fight this evil.
On Saturday, it's Armistice Day in the UK, a very important day where we obviously commemorate and honour those who sacrificed their lives in the wars. Your father undoubtedly would have lost people that were close to him when he served in the World War II. How do you feel about the fact there is a pro-Palestinian march, a big one, planned to take place on Saturday, on Armistice Day in London? There are calls here from many people now for this march to be banned, because many of the people marching in these marches have been chanting jihad from the river to the sea and other things like that.
It's atrocious and hypocritical, and I call upon all decent human beings to object to the march and ban it, because the symbol of that day is a symbol of victory, and it's a symbol of doing good, because when you fight evil, sometimes you have to fight. You have to fight evil in order to uproot evil. Unfortunately, we live with evil throughout the ages. And what we are seeing constantly is unbelievable evil. Unbelievable evil. We've seen terror. We've been harassed by terror all our lives. Terror is what stopped the Israeli-Palestinian peace. Terror is what undermines peace. We were in a historic process for the last 50 years of inclusion of Israel in the region, of peace agreements with Egypt, with Jordan, and the accords with the Palestinians, the Abraham Accords, which of course 4 other Arab nations signed with us, the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Morocco, and Sudan. They all signed with us agreements. We were moving forward. We had serious deliberations about the possibility of signing a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia and normalization. Well, this attack is part of a grand scheme to undermine this process of inclusion, doing peace, and turn the region into a region of war. And that is why world community has to be forceful and strong and oppose all these efforts and move strongly towards the inclusion of Israel in the region while giving security to Israel and all its neighbors.
How do you feel?
Commend world leadership. I commend President Joe Biden, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and the opposition leader Starmer, and Prime Minister and President of France Macron, and many others, of course, who've stood up with us against this process of evil. And this is the test of humanity and the entire world community these days.